Between two realms he stood, not wavering, but fixed in quiet, strong expectancy, like one who sightless listens for a command. So were they immobile on that earthly field, powers not of earth, though one in human clay. Luminous he moved away, behind him death.
Good morning. We're reading in Book 9, the Book of Eternal Night, Canto 1, Towards the Black Void. We've come to page 577 at the break. Satyavan has died in Savitri's arms, and at that time, all the humanity that was sort of remaining in her after her great realizations kind of disappeared, and she became the goddess, the divine mother. And she now is confronting death. And death has come to lead Satyavan's soul away to his realm of darkness. He's kind of leaned down over Satyavan's body and lifted him. Satyavan kind of emerged out of his physical body. His soul, his subtle body came out, and death began leading him to his realm. Satyavan leading the way, but death following behind him as leads a herder over his flock, over a wandering stray of his flock, leading him from behind into his realm. And behind death, Savitri follows, stepping in Satyavan's footprints as they go. So that's where we left off. And perhaps Margaret could begin at the break on 577.
At first, in a blind stress of woods she moved, with strange inhuman paces on the soil, journeying as if upon an unseen road. Around her, on the green and imaged earth, the flickering screen of forest ringed her steps. Its thick, luxurious obstacle of boughs besieged her body, pressing dimly through in a rich realm of whispers palpable, and all the murmurous beauty of the leaves rippled around her like an emerald robe. But more and more this grew an alien sound, and her old intimate body seemed to her a burden which her being remotely borne. Herself lived far in some uplifted scene, where to the trance-claimed vision of pursuit, soul presences in a high spaceless dream, the luminous spirit glided stilly on, and the great shadow travelled vague behind. Still was an amorous crowd of seeking hands, softly entreated by their old desires. Her senses felt earth's close and gentle air cling round them, and in troubled branches knew uncertain treadings of a faint foot wind. She bore dim fragrances, for callings touched. The wild bird's voice and its winged rustle came as if aside from some forgotten world. Earth stood aloof, yet near. Round her it wove its sweetness and its greatness, its greenness and delight, its brilliant wave of well-loved vivid hues, sunlight arriving to its golden moon, and the blue heavens and the calcing soil. The ancient mother offered to her child her simple word of kind, familiar things.
Thank you. Let's pause there. So they are moving in a subtle physical realm, but they're moving kind of away from Earth, from the senses, touch of the Earth, which is emphasized here in this passage. They're moving away from this closeness to the Earth realm, deeper into the realm of death. But here still they feel the close touch of the Earth atmosphere. She feels as if the touch of the leaves on her body as they move into the forest. But more and more, this sense of the physical becomes more burdensome. They feel that it's kind of, or she feels that it's sort of weighing her down, holding her back to the Earth atmosphere. And she will kind of break free of that shortly. But still she feels the touch of the earth and the green of the trees and the sunlight and the blue heavens, the sky and the soil beneath her feet. She still senses all of these. So she's still quite close to the earth realm. So we could continue. Tinika, are you ready? So we're on page 578.
Yeah. Then flaming from her body's nest.
No, we're not that far. But now,
okay. But now, as if the body's sensuous hold, curbing the godhead of her infinite walk, had freed those spirits to their grander road across some boundaries intangible bar, the silent God grew mighty and remote in other spaces, and the soul she loved lost its consenting nearness to her life. into a deep and unfamiliar air, enormous, windless. Without stir or sound, they seemed to enlarge away, drawn by some white pale distance from the warm control of earth and her grown far. Now they would escape. Then flaming from her body's nest alarmed, her violent spirit soared at Satyavan. Out, midst the plunge of heaven-surrounded rocks, so in a terror and wrath divine, from her eerie streams against the ascending death, indignant at its crouching point of steel, a fierce she-eagle threatened in her brood, borne on a rush of crescents and a cry, outwinging like a mass of golden fire. So on, a spirit's flaming outrush born, she crossed the borders of dividing sense. Like pale discarded sheath dropped fully down, her mortal members fell back from her soul.
Thank you. Let's pause there. So they're traveling deeper towards the black void, and death and Satyavan begin kind of moving away from her across some dividing line, and she still held back and away from or by the physicality, her connection to the earth and the physical. So they move away further and further from her, and she feels as if they're escaping from her touch and control. And at that moment, she flies out of her form, out of her subtle physical body, leaves it behind and jets towards death and Satyavan. I'll just read a few lines. Then flaming from her body's nest alarmed, her violent spirit soared at Satyavan. Yeah, it's a nice analogy, viewing the body as a nest from which he soars out. And then why is it flying? Well, it's emerging out of her physical. And he's comparing it to an eagle flying out of its nest. Outwinging like a mass of golden fire. So this, from her eyrie streams against the ascending death. This eyrie is also a nest for eagles. So he's comparing this scene to an eagle flying out of its nest because she feels that she's losing control or touch with Satchivan because he's proceeding further into this subtle realm towards the void, and she's still contained in a sense by her subtle, more physical body. Still subtle physical, but it's still close to the earth atmosphere. So she rushes out flaming from this hold of the earth. She crossed the borders of dividing sense, like pale discarded sheaths dropped dully down. Her mortal members fell back from her soul. She's entering into kind of a more subtle sheath, a more subtle aspect of her being, and leaving the more physical sheaths or bodies behind. So we can continue now.
A moment of secret's body sleep, her trance knew not of sun or earth or world. Thought, time and death were absent from her grasp. She knew not self, forgotten was Savitri. All she was the violent ocean of a will, where lived captive to an intense caress, possessed in a supreme identity, her aim, joy, origin, Satyavan alone. Her sovereign present in her being's core, he beat there like a rhythmic heart, herself, but different still, unloved, enveloped, clasped, a treasure saved from the collapse of space. Around him, nameless, infinite, she surged, her spirit fulfilled in her spirit, rich with all time, as if love's deathless moment had been found, a pearl within eternity's white shell. Then out of the engulfing sea of trance, her mind rose drenched to light streaming with hues of vision and awake once more to time, return to shape the lineaments of things and live in borders of the seen and known.
Thank you. Let's pause there. when she rushed out of her physical sheaths, or subtle physical sheaths, she lost the sense of herself, of being Savitri. Thought, time, and death were absent from her grasp. She must be in a very kind of subtle aspect of her being, maybe her soul. She seems has lost touch with the earth and with her sense of self. All was the violent ocean of a will. And the only thing that she senses then is holding Satchivan within her being, surrounding him, where lived captive to an immense caress, possessed in a supreme identity, her aim, joy, origin, Satchivan alone. So she feels herself enveloping him. He beat there like a rhythmic heart, herself, but different still, one loved, enveloped, clasped, a treasure saved from the collapse of space. So she's holding him within her being, identified with him. Yeah, always a violent ocean of will. That's very powerful. Read the whole line. Mm. Yeah, she's the Divine Mother, very powerful. Maybe this is the Kali aspect coming out. And then there's, these beautiful lines of her holding Satchivan within her, her spirit fulfilled in his spirit, rich with all time, as if love's deathless moment had been found, a pearl within eternity's white shell. But then from that state in which he senses only Satchivan kind of held within her, she starts coming back to a touch of the more familiar realms. Then out of the engulfing sea of trance, her mind rose, drenched to light, streaming with hues of vision, and awake once more to time, return to shape the lineaments of things, and live in borders of the seen and known. So she comes back into time, into space, into the world of forms again. Yeah, she was immersed in this trance where she had kind of forgotten, herself and all around her. And she's coming out of that depth of trance into a closer touch with things. Mm. Mm. Yeah, she's at the borderline. So we'll continue. Onward the three, halfway down.
Onward, the three still moved in her soul scene, as if pacing through fragments of a dream. She seemed to travel on, a visioned shape, imagining other musers like herself, by them imagined in their lonely sleep. Ungrasped, unreal, yet familiar, old, like clefts of unsubstantial memory, scenes often traversed, never lived in, fled past her, unheeding to forgotten goals. In voiceless regions they were travelers, alone in a new world, where souls were not, but only living moods. A strange, hushed, weird country was around them, strange far skies above, a doubting space where dreaming objects lived within themselves, their one unchanged idea. Weird were the grasses, weird the treeless plains, weird ran the road which, like fear, hastening towards that of which it has most terror, past phantomous between pillared, conscious rocks, sombre and high, gates brooding, whose stone thoughts lost their huge sense beyond in giant night. Enigma of the inconscience, sculptural sleep, symbols of the approach to darkness old, and monuments of a titanic ream, opening to depths like dumb, appalling jaws that wait a traveler down a haunted path, attracted to a mystery that slays. They watched across her road, cruel and still. Sentinels they stood of dumb necessity, mute heads of vigilant and sullen gloom, carved muzzle of a dim, enormous world.
Thank you. Here we get a more vivid picture of this path that they're moving on towards the black void. And we see in the beginning here that it's as if they're passing through a dream, or as if even through fragments of a dream, a kind of disjointed dream. She seemed to travel on, a vision shape imagined by other musers like herself. So she feels as if she's perhaps moving, as if imaged by others who are dreaming. The sense of substantial reality is slipped away. Ungrasped, unreal, yet familiar, old, like clefts of unsubstantial memory. Scenes often traversed, never lived in, fled past her unheeding to forgotten goals. There's some sense of familiarity, as if perhaps she's had that dream before, but still not really knowing it, a kind of a fleeting dream, a fleeting sense of being. In voiceless regions, they were travelers, alone in a new world where souls were not, but only living moods. A strange, hushed, weird country was round them. Strange, far skies above. A doubting space where dreaming objects lived within themselves, their one unchanged idea. Kind of a dream world where nothing is stable. Everything seems strange. So there's a sense of form that she's moving through a country, a countryside, weird where the grass is, weird the treeless plains, weird ran the road, which like fear, hastening towards that of which it has most terror, passed, phantasmal, between pillared conscious rocks, somber and high, gates brooding, whose stone thoughts lost their huge sense beyond in giant night. So it's as if she's moving between these rocks, rock formations on either side, as if through a gate, going into the darkness, deeper and deeper towards the void. And it's as if this is all kind of a symbolic representation of the inconscience, sculptural sleep, symbols of the approach to darkness old, and monuments of her titanic reign, opening to depths like dumb, appalling jaws that wait a traveler down a haunted path, a attracted to a mystery that slays. They watch across her road, cruel and still. These are these conscious rocks through which she's passing. Sentinels they stood of dumb necessity, mute heads of vigilant and sullen gloom, carved muzzle of a dim, enormous world. Carved muzzle. Yeah, it's like what a muzzle is something we put over a mouth. Yeah, I get the sense of it's almost like she's senses as if she's moving into a kind of a mouth, open jaws, into the darkness, into death, opening to depths like dumb, appalling jaws that wait a traveler down a haunted path. Yeah, these rocks, these pillared rocks through which he's passing seem like the carved muzzle of an enormous world. It's as if kind of she's passing into this, through into the mouth of this world of death. Let's continue. Helmut. Yeah, this death, the night, holds over the earth reign, its control and power. So it still holds the earth in its orbit of control. Yeah, maybe that's, I get the sense of it being maybe that's another sense of muzzle, not just the covering over the mouth, but even the snout itself. Yeah. Mm. Moving into it, I think. Okay.
Then to the chill, sear, heavy line arrived, where his feet touched the shadowy march's brink. Turning, arrested, luminous, Satyavan looked back with his wonderful eyes at Savitri. But death pealed forth his vast, abysmal cry. O mortal, turn back to thy transient kind. Aspire not to accompany death to his home, as if thy breath could live where time must die. Think not thy mind-born passionate strength from heaven to uplift thy spirit from its earthly base and, breaking out from the material cage, to upbuoy thy feet of dream in groundless nought and bear thee through the pathless infinite. Only in human limits man lives safe. Trust not in the unreal Lord of time, immortal deeming this image of thyself, which they have built on a dream's floating ground. Let not the dreadful goddess move thy soul to enlarge thy vehement trespass into worlds where it shall perish like a helpless thought.
Thank you. As they're passing through that gate between these pillared rocks into death's realm, Satyavan looks back at Savitri. And then death speaks to Savitri, tells her, warns her, O mortal, turn back to thy transient kind. Aspire not to accompany death to his home. So he warns her, as if thy breath could live where time must die. He's telling her, you cannot come here, you cannot survive in my realm. Don't be confused by these sense that you can survive and live here, that you're a goddess from heaven that can survive in my realm, that you can buoy thy feet of dream and groundless naught, that you can live and walk in this world of nothingness and move through the pathless infinite. Only in human limits man lives safe. Trust not in the unreal lords of time, immortal deeming this image of thyself. You're only imagining that you are immortal. And this imagination has been built on a dream's floating ground. The sense of immortality that you may have, it's only imagined in a dream, in the transient dream of earth. Let not the dreadful goddess move thy soul to enlarge thy vehement trespass into worlds where it shall perish like a helpless thought. Excuse me? Yeah. Yeah, he's telling her, don't believe these thoughts and imaginations that you are, a goddess. Hmm. Yeah, in fact, he's the Lord of Dharma, though. Perhaps he feels he's the real one, and the others are unreal. Okay, we'll continue. Roberto.
Know the cold termstones of thy hopes in life. Armed vainly with the ideals borrowed might. Dare not to outstep man's bound and measured force. Ignorant and stumbling, in brief boundaries pent, he crowns himself the world's mock suzerain, tormenting nature with the works of mind. O sleeper, dreaming of divinity, wake trembling mid the indifferent silences in which thy few weak chords of being die. Impermanent creatures, sorrowful of form of time, your transient love find not the eternal gods. The dread voice ebbed in the consenting hush, which seemed to close upon it, white and tense, a wordless sanction from the jaws of night. The woman answered not. Her hide nude soul, stripped of the girdle of immortality, against fixed destiny and the grooves of law, stood up in its sheer will of primal force. Still like a statue on its pedestal, lone in the silence and to vastness barred, against midnight's dumb abysses piled in front, a column shaft of fire and light she rose.
Thank you. This first line here, know the cold termstones of thy hopes in life. So these termstones are a boundary postern or stone. So some stones marking a boundary. But apparently this is a word coined by Sri Aurobindo from terminus, a deity who presides over boundaries. So he uses that term. So that's, I mean, this probably won't find in the dictionary, but and it's interesting that he uses this. Well, because they are, it's cold like death. I mean, it's, hope is something warm, you know, that one can, yeah. Yeah, just the sense of stone also, it's just like they're fixed, you know. Yeah. And then he gives a little bit of a preface to some of his arguments that will come in the coming cantos. Armed vainly with the ideals borrowed might. So he's saying, you have these ideals, but these are just borrowed things from your transient mind. These ideals are not eternal, and they have no control or law over this realm of death. So later we will have the dream twilight of the ideal. So he'll argue about these transience of ideals. We have these spiritual ideals, no? But even these, he's saying, have no eternity. They're not eternal. So stay within your boundaries. Don't torment nature with the works of mind. He's saying all these ideals are just processes of your ephemeral mind which will dissolve with your body. O sleeper dreaming of divinity, wake trembling mid the indifferent silences in which thy few weak chords of being die. And we can imagine perhaps the idealists who have entertained these great ideals of immortality or of these spiritual ideals of light and heaven, but at the moment when they're dying, they may have some doubts may come to them as they're entering into this darkness. And then again, he will bring up this other aspect that he'll argue, impermanent creatures, sorrowful foam of time, your transient loves by not the eternal gods. So Savitri will be arguing for her love, which is eternal and can outlast time, can outlast death. He's saying no. These loves are transient, born from your body's desires. They too will end. And then he stops speaking, and the hush of the silence of the void surrounds them, a sanction from the jaws of night. It's as if that silence confirms what he is saying. And Savitri answers not. But then he describes her high, nude soul, stripped of the girdle of mortality, against fixed destiny and the grooves of law, stood up in its sheer will, a primal force. So against all this which death is arguing about the transience of life and earth and mind, her will stands up against this, a primal force, an original power. And like a statue on its pedestal, she stood alone in the silence and to vastness bared, against midnight's dumb abysses piled in front. A columned shaft of fire and light she rose. So we can maybe begin reading the next canto. Canto 2. Anandi.
The journey in eternal night, and the voice of the darkness. A while on the chill dreadful edge of night, all stood as if the world were doomed to die, and waited on the eternal silent brink. Heaven leaned toward them like a cloudy brow of menace through the dim and voiceless sky. As thoughts stand mute on a despairing verge, where the last steps plunge into nothingness and the last dreams not end, they paused in their front, where looms like shadowy wings behind them, pale. The lifeless evening was a dead man's gaze. Hungry beyond the night desired her soul, but still in its lone niche of temple strength, motionless, her flame-bright spirit, mute, erect, burned like a torch fire from a window at sea, pointing against the darkness' somber breast. The women first affront the abyss, daring to journey through the eternal night. Armored with light, she advanced her footing to plunge into the dread and useless vacancy. Immortal and appalled, her spirit faced the danger of the ruthless AI lies waste. Against night's inky ground they steal, mouthing mysterious motion of her human tread. A swimming action and a drifting march, like figures moving before eyelids closed. All, as in dreams, went sleeping, gliding on. The rock's gate's heavy walls were left behind, as if broad passage of receding time, present and past into the timeless lapsed, arrested upon dim adventure brink. The future ended, drowned into nothingness.
Thank you. Can we go this Tinika? Or, yeah, we go up to the top.
Amid collapsing shapes, they they won't obscure the fading vegetables of a tenderous world. Receive them where they seem to move and yet be still, nowhere advancing yet to pass. A dumb procession, a dim picture bounds, not conscious forms trading a real sea, a mystery of terror's boundlessness, gathering its hungry strain, the huge, pitiless void, surrounded slowly with its soundless depth and monstrous ca- uh, cavernous, cavernous, a shapeless throat, devoured her into its shadow, shadowy strangling mass, the fate's spiritual agony of a dream, a curtain of impenetrable dread. The darkness hues around her cage of sense as when the trees have turned to blotted shades, and the last friendly glimmer fades away around a bullock in the forest tired by hunters closes in no empty night.
Thank you. Sir, would you like to read? Would you like to read? We're on page 583, halfway down.
Like eternal night and the voice of darkness.
No,
Chapter.
page 583, the next page,
Okay.
halfway down, line 50.
Could you please tell the line? No, no.
The thought that strives, just halfway down.
Master Aurobindo. The thought that strives in the world was here unmade. Its effort it renounced to live and know, convinced at last that it had never been, it perished, all its dream of action done. This cluttered cipher was its dark result. In this smoothing stress of this stupendous knot, mind could not think, breath could not breathe, the soul could not remember or feel itself. It seemed a hollow gulf of sterile emptiness, a zero oblivious of the sum it closed, and an abnegation of the Maker's joy, saved by no wide repose, no depth of peace, on all that claims here to be truth and God, and conscious self, and the revealing word, and the creative rapture of the mind, and love and knowledge and heart's delight there fell, the immense refusal of the eternal no, as disappears a golden lamp in gloom, born into distance from the eye's desire, into the shadows vanished Savitri.
Thank you. Let's stop there. So we're going to stop.
Still, like a statue on its pedestal, lone in the silence and vastness bare. Against midnight's dumb abysses piled in front, a columned shaft of fire and light, she rose.
Thanks to Sri Aurobindo.